Yeah, look at Emu back there, ladies and gentlemen. They just think they're all that in a bag of potato chips, don't you, Emu? Well, little did you know, I actually have the bag of potato chips. Yeah, you think you're all hot stuff with your grimoire? Well, I have a grimoire too, right here. I actually don't. Well, actually, I might. Hold on. Oh yeah, I have. I don't know if it counts as a grimoire, but I have Bandit's Secret. So I don't know. I mean, technically speaking, Crollo could probably use Bandit's Secret to steal the abilities of Emu. I don't see anything in the law of anime that says that, he couldn't. So that counts, right? It's basically a magical grimoire. Yeah. Little do people know, I actually have the ability to pull anything out of non-existence as long as it's for the sake of a YouTube bit. So, yeah, it's a weird superpower, but I'll go along with it. All right. So Emu likes to make contracts with people. I wanna delve into that a little bit because I think a lot of these contracts are not really signed in good faith. I think a lot of these contracts are made under duress, I would say. All right. So the only person that we know of, like, that actually went through the process that we saw on screen of getting these covenants, and we kind of got to see what that was all about, was Harald. Obviously, Shanks has one, had one, I guess, although he might still have it. We'll get into that. He got the arm lopped off or bitten off by the Lord of the Coast, the one that actually had the Shallows covenant on it, but he might still actually have the covenant, but we'll get to that later. Obviously, the Gods Knights like Summers and Killingham have it. Shamrock most likely has, the covenants. I think it was pretty much confirmed he has one. In fact, I think we saw an armband around Shamrock that had the Deep Sea Covenant. So we never saw the tattoo on him, but he most likely has the Deep Sea Covenant. It was mentioned that between the Deep Sea Covenant and the Abyssal Covenant, there are 13 individuals that have all of those together, and then an unknown number that have the Shallows Covenant, right? Okay. But Harald, we actually got to see the moment he got the Shallows Covenant put on him by the Gorosei, very specifically the Gorosei. Eam was not involved in that ceremony. And then later on, when Harald is promoted to God's Knight, we see him getting an audience with Emu, and then a little bit of the process on exactly how you get the upgrade from the bronze package to the silver package. It doesn't look very enjoyable. Harald seemed to be in a lot of pain. But there's some weird stuff with this, okay? So we know that the Shallows Covenant, when you get that branded on you, you are unable to disobey a direct order from Emu if you are within their presence. But as long as you're away from Emu, as if like leaving Marijois, going out there into the rest of the world, you seem to be okay. And that's kind of like how Shanks got away with it. And then when you have the Deep Sea Covenant, the silver package, you're able to be manipulated and controlled anywhere in the world. But it comes with some other benefits, like you can travel via the Abyss, and you have the immortal body that can regenerate, and you get a strength boost and all that extra stuff as well. Emu can also apparently communicate with you like directly through your brain when you have that power, okay? So how exactly do you get it, though? Like step by step, what is the process? And this is important, all right? It's actually really important. Because when we see Harald getting the Shallow Covenant on him, he's in the company of the Gorosei. Emu is not even around. And we kind of just cut over to see him having it on his arm, and Harald doesn't seem particularly disturbed or in pain. Like he did when he got the second one. When he got the first one put on him, he's just like, okay, this is a cool tattoo. Check this out. Right? Like, that was it. And then the Gorosei were explaining the covenant systems and everything, and like, yes, Harald, yes, we're glad that you enjoy your new tattoo, but that one is merely a shallow covenant. It is mere the vestige of a pact. In order to really get somewhere in this organization, you gotta go even higher up, right? Okay. So then, cut to a little while later, he gets an audience with Emu, and then you just pan out from the castle, and it's sort of, the page sort of distorts to imply that Harald is like screaming and something really crazy evil is going on. and Harold is on the ground like, Harold's on the ground, writhing in pain as Batman changed back into Bruce Wayne. That's right, Batman was also there, and he couldn't do anything against the Covenant either, right? So that process, very painful, and Harold mentioned, like, it chills me down to my very bones, right? And it feels like your whole body is being remade, right? And he's like, this power, the absolute power, he gets back up, and even the Gorosei are talking about how, yes, it's still as terrifying as always. I remember when I got the Covenant, right? Okay, so here's the question here. The word that is used is contract or covenant. It's keiyaku in Japanese. Keiyaku is literally the Japanese term for contract or agreement or covenant. In terms of what the difference between a contract and a covenant is, you could look at them kind of meaning the same thing. A contract more of like a legal perspective. Covenant you could look at from a more like moral perspective, loyalty, faith, maybe a covenant in a higher power, as it were. So I would say covenant is probably the more correct term, but contract is kind of interchangeable. Keiyaku kind of means the same thing. So it's Senkai Keiyaku is the Shallows Covenant, Shinkai Keiyaku is the Deep Sea Covenant, and Shinkai Keiyaku is the Abyssal Covenant, all right? So once again, though, the whole idea of like a covenant or an agreement or a contract is sort of like, here are the terms that I am presenting to you. Do you agree with said terms? One party presents the deals, the terms, and then the other party has to agree to it. That's what a contract is, right? And that's the term, keiyaku, right? So you sign the piece of paper like, oh, these terms are in agreement, okay? And you could either sign that in ink or blood. Either way, it's still a contract, right? Anything else, if you were signed it under threat of death, it was like, sign this contract or I'm going to stab you with a pike. Because, if you're going to threaten somebody to sign a contract, you might as well threaten them with a weapon from the Middle Ages. You could threaten somebody with a gun, but that's boring. Threaten them with, like, a halberd or something, right? It's like, I shall stab thee with this pike unless thou sign this contract. It's like, okay, fine, I'll sign the contract. Damn. That would be something called duress. That would be signing something under duress. Now, going back to Emu here, there doesn't seem to be much of an agreement on both sides. Maybe with the Shallow Covenant, although we didn't know that whole, scope of that. But we also see with Emu's abilities, like the Domi Reversi ability they used against Ori and Bragi, there isn't any agreement. Like, remember that part when Emu Gunko pulls out the grimoire, and I thought for a moment, like, oh, this is going to be some, like, Faustian deal type shit, where Emu Gunko is going to be like, would you like ultimate power, Bragi? And then Bragi has to, like, sign the book, or put his blood or thumbprint in the book, or something like that. And then Emu's like, ha, the contract has been fulfilled. That's not how it worked. Emu doesn't even use the contract, like, with the book. The book is for, like, summoning, like, cannons and giant demon shotguns or something, which is cool. Don't get me wrong, that was a sick thing for Emu to pull out a double-barrel shotgun and just blow off Bragi's arm. That came out of nowhere. But in terms of, like, actually turning them evil, Emu didn't seem to have, need any agreement or terms or anything. Emu was just like, Domi Reversi, and then to further that up, not only Bragi and Dory were Domi Reversi'd, everybody that stood in between them also got flipped automatically, without any of their input, right? So I'm just saying, Emu, these abilities really shouldn't be called contracts. That is not what these are. It's very possible that the Gorosei could have, like, given the terms to Harold when he was in the Room of Authority, right? It'd be like, hey, we're considering you for a God's Knight, but first you have to become a God's Steel, which means we have to give you this tattoo to represent the covenant between you and the Great One. And Harold, because, Harold was pretty much sunk cost fallacy at this point, he was just like, yeah, okay, let's go ahead and do that. How did he get the tattoo? Like, how did he physically get it on him? Was it just like the Gorosei? Like, did Top Man take out a tattooing gun? Top Man takes out, like, a leather jacket and a big tattoo chair appears in the Room of Authority. He's like, all right, hold on, let's go. I don't know why I'm picturing Top Man as the guy that's the tattoo artist. He's the one that just looks like the most like a tattoo artist for me. I think it's because of the mustache. I don't know. He's just like, all right, after this is done, do you want something else? I could do something else. He's like, Harold would be like, well, can you tattoo the name of my wife on my arm? You know, it just says Ida or Estrid with a big heart around it. He's like, yeah, I could do that for you, right? Did he? That sounds silly and goofy, so that's probably not the way it went down. Although this is One Piece, so that could have been totally the way it went down. It more than likely seemed like it was magic, right? Harold agreed to the terms, and then, I don't know, magic fire or something just... And then, boom, tattoo appeared on his arm. And he didn't seem very concerned about that. If anything, he saw like, wow, this is a pretty cool tattoo. I'm one step closer to my dream. Great. Okay. So, remember what the Shallow Covenant does. It doesn't do much, but apparently what it does do is means you cannot resist an order from Imu when you're in their presence. So then Harold is taken into the presence of Imu, and Imu's like, I will now bestow upon you the Deep Sea Covenant. Harold now has that seal. He couldn't say no to that even if he wanted to. So once again, this is under duress, Imu. This is clearly a violation. All right? I don't think Imu gives a shit, but, you know, yeah. So my point is, since we are doing this contract thing, you know, the Keiaku, the whole conversation with contracts and agreements and all this other kind of stuff, right? Is there a way to void the contract? Because we've seen this, you know, if you just, like, slam a lot of Conqueror's hockey into them, you know, you might be able to, like, kill them, as we saw with Harold and Loki. Like, Harold had the Deep Sea Covenant, and then Loki came out in his dragon hybrid and just ripped him apart, and then blew him up with Ragnir, and then he died right then and there, okay? So that's one way to void the contract, is you get killed. But is there any way to void the contract without dying? Right? Now, we also know that this is something on Imu. This does tax Imu in a way. Imu says they cannot just hand out these, contracts willy-nilly. You know, that's probably the reason there's a limit to 13 individuals for the Deep Sea and the Abyssal Covenants, right? They can't go any higher than that because any more than that might actually, you know, Imu might not be able to handle it, right? We don't exactly know what it is. Like, Imu is probably, like, dishing out part of their power. And in the case with Harold, when Harold died, did that power go back to Imu? It seems like it didn't. It seems like that power, like a Horcrux or something, was just broken forever, and now Imu has lost like a 13th of their soul or something like that, right? So that's a really big deal. It basically also means that in order to properly kill Imu, you're gonna have to kill at least 13 other individuals, possibly just 12 of them now. Although Imu could have given somebody like Harold's spot, although maybe they didn't, if that literally takes part of their soul to do that. So maybe they can only manage 13 at once. But then again, I imagine the God's Knights don't die very often. Harold dying was probably something that came out of nowhere. That was probably just like, whoa, didn't expect that to happen. Imu was even shocked by that. It's like, what the hell is lurking in Elbaf that could have killed a freaking member of the God's Knights, let alone one that had the power of the Deep Sea Covenant that was an ancient giant? How does that even happen, right? So I'm sure other God's Knights have died before, but it probably very rarely happens, and when it does happen, Imu feels that effect, all right? Maybe Imu can recover, but maybe it takes a long time. Maybe it takes decades, maybe centuries for Imu to recover fully. So there might just be 12 members with the Deep and the Abyssal Covenants right now because of Harold's death. So keep that in mind. Now, going back to Shanks for a moment, because Shanks only had the Shallows Covenant, right? And he had that arm with the seal on it ripped off by the Sea King, all right, the Lord of the Coast, right? So you might think, okay, though that means that Shanks is just freed then. You know, he's no longer bound by this covenant. Okay, well, that depends on a lot of things. Considering this is like some form of magic, we don't know if it's devil fruit magic or like if Imu is the legitimate devil, or a god, or something in between, or whatever. But we know this shit involves some kind of magic, right? So is the magic just like in the physical mark? Like you have a mark on your body of that seal, of that covenant. All you gotta do is get rid of that mark. And the seal is broken, the covenant is voided, and there's nothing Imu could do about it. I don't know, because that seems more of like something that's like marked on your soul or something like that, right? Like if that was the case, you know, couldn't you just like, well, first of all, if that was the case, if all you needed to do to void the contract was just remove the mark from your body, why put it on your arm? Because, like, I mean, I know a lot of people like to have both arms, but, like, you can live with just one arm, right? If you put the covenant, like, on your head or, like, over your heart or maybe not even outside your body, like, I inscribe the covenant of the deep sea on your heart, like, on your physical organ. Now, it's not as cool because you won't be able to see it because it's a manga, so you have to, like, oh, check out this cool, like, demon seal tattoo I got or something like that, right? But my point is, if you just put that seal somewhere else on the body, it's like, all right, well, it's on your heart, so you can't cut off your heart, unless you're Law. Maybe Law's power might be a hard counter to Emu's ability. Then again, maybe not, because like when Law removes body parts, like Law removed Smoker's heart, Smoker still was alive, and he was able to do everything. It's just that the heart didn't actually, like, removal didn't kill him. That's just the abilities of the Op-Op fruit, right? But what I'm saying here is, what if Shanks ever finds himself within the presence of Emu? And then Shanks is like, well, I ripped off my arm, so you got no power over me anymore. And Emu's just like, ara, ara. You thought that simply the tattoo on your arm was all that bound us? I literally inscribed my power on your very soul. You will listen to me now. And Shanks might be like, oh, like, I have to obey them, right? Okay. And then in addition to that, Emu might just be like, your arm grows back, and then Shanks's arm grows back, and the seal with it, and then upgrades him apparently by force, because he can't say no to that at that point with the Shallows Covenant, to the Deep Sea Covenant, and then we have evil Shanks, like actual proper evil Shanks, like not kind of like, well, Shanks was actually doing this the entire time. No, just a straight up evil Shanks, right? So, and then Shamrock might be the good guy, and that might be the twist at the end of One Piece. Shamrock turns out to be the good guy, Shanks turns evil, Shamrock has to kill Shanks, and then we're just left with a Shamrock. Could be. Could be. You just never know. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Like, the removal, like, I don't think, like, taking, like, paint or something and just, I'm going to paint over this Covenant seal, that's going to do anything to it. Stabbing it's probably not going to do anything. And once you get to the Deep Sea Covenant, you regenerate, so you physically cannot rip it off. Although, when Loki was completely manhandling Harald and just ripping him apart, at the end, Harald seemed to return to his senses a little bit, and it seemed like when that mark was physically just ripped to shreds and before his body had regenerated, that was when he sort of got his mind back. And the more his body regenerated and the seal along with it, that's when he started to slip back into it. So I guess it really is just the seal. You know, I guess it really is the seal. You get rid of that seal, you're good. So thankfully, most of the Gods Knights have it on their arms. So that would be a crucial weakness right there to void the contract or whatever. You know, just lop off Summers' arm and he doesn't have the power anymore, I guess. Or at least he'll have his, like, well, no, he would still regenerate. It's just that he would regain his senses, although in the case of Summers, he was already probably a messed up dude. So even before that, so that's the thing. Like, it doesn't remove the power or the influence. It just kind of gives back your own sanity for like a little while. But Harald was still regenerating against his will. I kind of like this. I like the idea that Oda is making this like a really difficult power to deal with. There's no easy way to deal with this. All right, it's not just like, oh, all you got to do is just cut off his arm and then all of his powers are turned off. No, the powers aren't turned off. Maybe they get back to their senses, like Emu cannot like influence them as much, but they're still regenerating against their will. So, you know, that's not an easy way to deal with it. You can use a boatload of Conqueror's Haki and Loki's ability to just rip them to shreds, but that kills them. That doesn't, you know, turn them back to normal, right? So, yeah, now, something else, while I was going through all of this stuff and researching everything, when Emu was turning Dorian Bragi into the Domi Reversi demons, right, there's like a point of contention over whether or not Dorian Bragi have that regeneration ability, right? Or that Domi Reversi beings have the immortality in the same way that the Covenant bearers do. It seemed like up until now they don't, because remember, like, Rox's family got Domi Reversi'd. Rox cut them all down. They didn't seem like they were regenerating. Dorian Bragi, a couple of chapters ago, you know, slashed each other when that was Zoro's, you know, great plan right there. But Dorian Bragi slashed each other, and it didn't seem like they were coming right back up like the other, like, Covenant bearers, like Harald would have. Something weird about that is when, in the original Japanese, when Emu was giving them
the seal was like flipping them with Domi Reversi, Imu uses the term Fushi no Seimei, which means immortality, immortal life, and strength. They are saying, I am granting you an immortal body and unyielding strength or great power. Domi Reversi. So I just noticed that in the Japanese, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess we'll have to wait and see, because I guess we saw Rox defeat his family members, but we never saw them, like, maybe they did regenerate after the fact. And we know that when Rox fought against Garling off screen, Garling got handily defeated and was like half of his head was missing. He still regenerated, it just took a while. Could have been the same thing with Rox's family. Dory and Bragi slashed each other pretty bad, and we saw them bleed and fall down. We haven't seen them since. They might be able to regenerate and get back up, because Imu did use the term Fushi no Seimei, like immortal body. You are getting this. All right?
Interesting. Just wanted to point that out, because that was just something I noticed. Okay. Well, anyway, yeah. So how would you think you could properly void the Covenant Seal? Or even if there is a way to void the Covenant Seal, is there a way for the Covenant Bearer? Let's assume Imu does give you a fragment of their soul, like a Horcrux. Is there any way to reverse that process? So you would just be like, I void the contract. I'm giving you back your power, Imu, in exchange for my freedom. Would there be a way for one of the Covenant Bearers to do it that way? Now, Imu would still get their power back, not great, but that Covenant would, like, disappear or, like, melt. And it's like, okay, I'm no longer under your protection anymore. I'm no longer under your constant eye and control. There might be a way to do that. And if there is a way to do that, I mean, obviously, Imu would be the only person that would know how to do that, right? In fact, I don't even think the Gorosei would know about that, right? If there was a way, because that's the whole idea, right? Whenever you're dealing with a work of fiction and there's some kind of demon doing Faustian deals and contracts, there's always some way to, like, reverse it. There's some way, some loophole to get around it. It's just usually a real pain in the ass. And Imu might know that loophole. Imu isn't telling anybody about how that works, right? Maybe it's written in Imu's grimoire. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe you get your hands on Imu's magic book. Maybe you could read it and just be like, wait a minute, hold on a second. Oh my god. It's a cookbook. Turns out Bandit's secret was just a cookbook the whole time. That was Crollo's hobby. He liked to cook. Whatever. All right. Anywho, that's the video. Hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you think about this whole Keiyaku cake contract covenant mess, if there's any way to get out of this, and, you know, how this whole thing functions. Is Shanks still under the control of it? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching. Tekking, signing out.